True story, I've now had to film this review 4 times because FPL apparently did not fix my power lines very well. So if this is actually online and you're watching it, it means someone actually came along and fixed my electricity. Thank you. This is one of those toys where I honestly had to look through my own video archives just to make sure I haven't dedicated a video to it yet, because it seems like I surely should have by now. I mean, I keep calling this thing my favorite Starscream design, so why wouldn't I have talked about it? Well, I searched. I haven't. Not outside the top 10 of the decade, so let's actually delve into Galaxy Force Starscream, and we'll actually explain why it ranks so high. Now, for starters, some of you might be wondering why my Cybertron Starscream is so tiny. Nope, this is the Japanese version where it was only a Voyager size, and that comes with more differences than you might think. Now, for starters, he is cast mostly in an off-white or a light gray plastic with some black plastic here and there as necessary. That leaves everything else as paint. Welcome to the mid-2000s where they did not skimp on the paint gun. You can see red details all over, and I've double-checked. All of the red you see is actual paint. This thing is just lavishly decoed from top to bottom, making sure this is as accurate to how he appeared in the show as it could get. That is both Takara's way as well as the way of the mid-2000s, where we got things this pretty. Seems like so long ago. No way, it's over a decade. Yeah, that was a while ago. So, as you can see, he is a very Cybertronian style of space fighter jet, emulating the G1 Tetra jet design. If you don't know what that is, go look at the original episode of the first Transformers cartoon. The idea was these pyramid-shaped jets, as alien of a design as I could think of to turn an Earth jet into, and this is kind of emulating that, which is actually an emulation of the War Within version of Starscream that was also emulating the Tetra jet. It's weird, it's complicated. Needless to say, the design element has a lot of different origins to it. But what we do get is a far bulkier and more powerful jet for Starscream than we normally see. He's very sleek and very thin most often. This thing is a powerhouse. This thing looks like it could fly at light speed and blow up a few Star Destroyers while it's at it. It is exceptionally heavy duty, which is one of the reasons I like it so much. So for basic features, you do have landing gear, or actually, you just have wheels at the bottom that roll fairly well. It does have good weight to it, so it has that going for it. Translucent purple for the cockpit, which you can see an actual chair molded in. I will ask it every time. You can carve it into my grave when I'm gone. Why would a Transformer in a Cybertronian mode have a cockpit seated for a human? Especially a Decepticon, who would most likely just step on the little flesh bag. I don't know. It's still going to be bugging me to the day I die. But as you can see, he is very, very detailed. He's got tons of molding all across his form. That said, he also has a few simplifications. Yeah, he's pulling a little of an Energon Ironhide there. That is very clearly his head. At the very least, his face is completely hidden, but at the same time, it's a Cybertronian design, so I kind of forgive things like, well, I can obviously tell that's his head. I can obviously tell that's his feet. The Cybertronian mode isn't trying to disguise itself as an Earth vehicle, so why would he bother hiding things like his hands being very obvious over there? Turbines in the back, yeah, you've seen it all by now. It's an exceptionally well-designed toy. It's extremely cool-looking vehicle. Now, there is a cyber key slot in the back, and we could go ahead and plug in the cyber key and actually see what it does, but it's pretty much the same thing it does in robot mode, so I'm going to save it till then, when it's a bit more effective and dynamic. I will go ahead and let you know that there is a port on the underside which can store/mount his additional missile launcher, which is one of the features that is not included on the Supreme version of the mold. This little accessory gun that he has. It's rather basic, but it gets the job done, and it gives him a little bit of firepower to shoot at offending Autobots. So, let's get this guy transformed. Now, I will admit, transformation on this is very basic. Cybertronian modes tend to do that, but I think it uses it very effectively. So, this is a little bit scary to transform here. Starters, I'm going to try and disengage as many of these pegs here as I can. That includes little catches that are holding it into the nose piece here. Hang on. It's also a very expensive toy to replace, so I also don't want to do anything too rough to it. Now, the hard part to this is that paint on the side is going to scrape into these arms, and you can't really reposition these arms in any way in order to facilitate the leg transformation better and prevent scraping, because they have to be at this pretty much this exact angle in order to actually accommodate the transformation. So you just kind of have to pull the legs down while you get them out in order to make sure everything clears without scrapage. You can see a little bit of scrapage there where I wasn't careful. Alright, so feet down, heel out, toe in. Simple as that. Heel out. That's actually the nose cone. In. Torso goes down, clips into place. Arms flip out the back. Rotate the arms down like so. And then to the back. Split the tail fin. That, like I said, very simple to transform, gives you your robot mode Starscream. It's an exceptionally simple transformation, but you know what? It's pretty effective. It still creates a really nice robot silhouette, very reminiscent of the Unicron trilogy style of Starscream. And you know what? Sometimes a quick transformation is the best. It's kind of nice when I don't have to dedicate, a good chunk of my afternoon just to see the robot mode of something. So, let's see. The head design is, of course, classic Starscream, but it does have a little bit more of the trilogy element to it. It did get kind of a redesign back in the mid-2000s when Starscream was reintroduced as a character, and this kind of maintains more of that. It's not quite the classic Seeker, but it's close enough. And of course, you've got things like the shoulder pylons to kind of give you that, old school look and just to remind you who this guy is. So, something else that's typical of Cybertronian modes on these toys, pretty much all of the detail from one mode carries over to the other. There's not a whole lot of new stuff to show off. What I can show off is this is a very different take on Starscream, which is something I really liked. Starscream is typically a very thin, very scrawny character that's mostly designed for speed. Typically when you see Starscream, his proportions are very even, his arms are rather thin, and he's supposed to look fast. He's supposed to look a little bit more streamlined. This Starscream is definitely not that. The shoulders are huge, and rather than the traditional wing pack on his back, he's decided his wings are now going to live on his shoulders. If you look, pretty much all of the classic traits, the wings as well as the null rays for the arms, are all integrated into one unit that hangs off the shoulder, which gives him a very wide, powerful appearance. The heavy legs do the exact same thing. Even the chest is a little bit heavier duty than you typically see, because standard Starscream's cockpit would be up here, so it's kind of like he has a glass chest kind of look to him. Here, more powerful. Very, very cool. What you have here is a Starscream that kind of invokes the power that I think Starscream always thinks he has, rather than he actually does. The details work exceptionally well here. I love how the red carries over, and I also like the red going all the way through diagonally like that. It's exceptionally well painted all over, and you can see just how well it works for most of its designs. Take a look at the back. You can see this is pre-hollowed out era, outside of what was required for transformation. Everything's pretty solid. You don't really have any kind of gappage that you'd see these days on Transformers. He's got weight to him. He's very bulky and built well. Even back parts like this get some molding to them, just to make sure every angle in this guy is interesting in some way. I always appreciate detail like that. Now, I'll go ahead and let you know, the limit to this guy is the articulation, so that's the downside. I guess every figure needs one at some point. So, the head does rotate all the way around, so that's good. Maybe he should be looking backwards for his jet mode, now that I think of it. The arms are the real Achilles heel. So you do have little hinges here, so you can adjust the wings should you want them out of the way for any reason. But you also have shoulders that are fine going up and down, forward and back that is, but to go outward doesn't really have any kind of clearance. This big shoulder is actually banging into the corner of his chest. Now if I hinge up, I get a much wider reach, but you'll note still not a very wide reach, especially if you're used to a modern Transformers level of articulation. See, unfortunately, he just does not have that kind of range. Now, this also continues to change as you move the shoulder. If you move it farther down, thruster in the back starts hitting the tail fin, meaning he pushes the arm a little bit closer in. This is a little bit frustrating, unfortunately. And yeah, there's no real way to get around that. His shoulders just are not that great. Also, due to the way he transforms, he has no bicep rotation, and his arms are left to basic 90-degree elbows, which are very, very stiff joints and heavily ratcheted, which means if your friction points are a little bit loose, that bicep connection can actually pull out when you're trying to bend the elbow. That's frustrating. Nothing at the waist, but luckily everything else seems to be pretty good. Universal hips that are heavily ball joint or heavily ratcheted joints. Full 360 on the thigh swivel, and again, all that lovely ratcheting. So at the very least, the articulation he has is exceptionally solid. So that's that makes up for it a little bit. And he is capable of some extremely cool and powerful looking poses. It is just unfortunate that his shoulders ended up so limited when everything else on this guy is excelling, especially for his time. So now to Gimmick, because everything had to have a gimmick back then. Well, for starters, he can wield his standard rifle if you want him to. It mounts right there. Nothing too special about that, but hey, it's an advantage over the Supreme version. Here's the other advantage over the Supreme version, is the Gimmick far more dynamic here. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way so you can see it completely. So he has your standard generic Cybertronian Decepticon force chip. And that's a force chip, not a cyber key, so it does have no code. It does have no code? It has no code on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it into his force chip slot right there in the back. And it's a little bit stiff these days because it's an old toy, but if we get a really good click in, both arms release Energon blades at the same time. This is another reason why I kind of forgive the lack of shoulder articulation, because the fact that both blades can spring at the same time on two fully articulated arms, is kind of cool. Like, there's a lot of really cool function there and a lot of gimmick that's, you can tell a lot of that backpack there is designed to make sure that Gimmick has all the gears it needs to work, because that's a really cool thing. No matter what position the arms are in, they're going to unleash these blades, and these are actually very cool blades. I've always been a fan of this Gimmick, and just how dynamic it ends up looking because of how effective it is. Seeing both blades release simultaneously. Again, I find that better than the Supreme version, who needs a force chip in each arm just to make his blade and cannon pop out. So that, my friends, is Galaxy Force Starscream, a toy that commands heavy aftermarket price, so reviews like this of an old toy do tend to come in handy for such things. His articulation is definitely not what you would expect if you're used to a modern Transformer, especially in the arms. But the Gimmick is exceptionally effective. He's nicely built, very heavy, and absolutely paint-loaded. Now, even if you can only get one of the American versions of the toy, which is basically down to the shattered glass and the thrust repainted version, which actually both tend to be more expensive, strangely enough. There is no real cheap version of this mold. I do think it is worth an investment if you really dig that design. It's a really fun toy to goof with and has a lot of good things going for it in spite of a few faults here and there. If I could only get it in Skywarp colors, this thing would be absolutely perfect. Everyone go pre-order the Galaxy Meteor third party. I really want that one to make it far enough to Skywarp repaints.